It's October 13th, and Israel still hasn't retaliated for Iran's ballistic missile assault against it on October 1st. The United States has enmeshed itself in Israel's strategic decision-making levels like there's no November 5th. And Israel seems to be escaping from the United States' strategic straitjacket that it's been living under since 2009. I'll have details on all of these things coming up on In Focus. We're in a race against time ahead of November 5th to achieve some sort of strategic checkmate against Iran and its terror armies that have been warring against Israel since October 7th of last year. And to this end, Israel's decision-making levels continue to be gripped by the question of how Israel is supposed to retaliate against Iran's massive ballistic missile assault against this country on October 1st. Just to recap, so we remember, Iran launched the largest, I think, ever ballistic missile assault against Israel that day, and it was targeting strategic sites in Israel, according to battle damage estimates that have been carried out by various experts online based on satellite imagery. Iran seemed to have been targeting 3 different air bases and caused significant damage, although nothing strategically debilitating, to one of Israel's air bases. It also was targeting the headquarters of the Mossad, which are located outside of Tel Aviv, not revealing any secrets here. And what actually ended up being attacked was an apartment block in the town of Hod HaSharon, in the Sharon district north of Tel Aviv, and 100 apartments were reportedly harmed during that assault. And this was just a massive ballistic missile barrage. Israel intercepted, apparently, according to news reports, again, about 85% of the missiles that Iran shot against it, but 15% of them got in, and they caused the damage that I mentioned that's been published so far. And I certainly don't have the classified reports about what it actually was able to accomplish. And if I did, I wouldn't be sharing it with you. All the same, this was a massive assault. And there, but by the grace of God and the Arrow interceptor missiles, Israel would have really suffered some significant damage both to strategic sites and to civilian population centers that night. So the question is, what is Israel supposed to do in retaliation? And that question has become sort of the linchpin of the disparity between America's strategic concept for what a post-war Middle East is supposed to look like and what Israel's strategic concept is. I just wrote a long article sort of outlining both sides in JNS that was published today, October 13th, so you can take a look at that if you want some background material on it. But suffice it to say, I want you to watch an interview that Richard Dearlove, who's not known, certainly I never thought of him as a particular supporter of Israel. He was the head of Britain's spy agency, the MI6, between, I think, 1998 and 2004, so under Tony Blair's premiership. And Dearlove gave an interview last week to the Times of London in their podcast that was broadcast on YouTube, where he talked about the strategic implications for the region of Israel's assaults on Hezbollah's leadership with the beepers and the walkie-talkies, and then the airstrikes against Hezbollah's leadership, and also that killed Nasrallah and the leadership of their ground forces, the Radwan brigades, and took out apparently a significant portion of Hezbollah's missile arsenal. I just want to take you through several of the clips of this interview, to which, if you have time, you should look up and watch, because it's worth seeing the whole thing. It's only like 10 minutes, but I'm only going to show you a few clips. So first of all, the first clip that I want to talk to you about is the one where he's talking about where we were strategically before Israel carried out that unbelievable intelligence operation that removed about 3,000 of Hezbollah's leadership ranks from the war. So we're just going to go to the first clip and what the expectations were related to the war until that happened. So let's just watch that first.
Are we on the threshold of something different, or is this just a repetition of the pattern whereby maybe this conflict ends in some sort of partial agreement, partial ceasefire that solves no problems, and then we look ahead and we build up to another major military exchange? However, I'm probably of the view at the moment that something fundamental is changing, and that Israel have, against people's expectations, challenged Iran's policy of fighting and destabilizing the Middle East through its proxies.
Okay, and I want to play you a different clip now of what he calls Israel calling Iran's bluff. So let's just go to that clip right now.
Israel has realized it's got the capability to call Iran's bluff. And Iran's policy, which has been very effective hitherto, is looking as though it's about to break apart and fail.
Okay, so all of this is really interesting. First of all, the source itself is interesting, because if Dearlove is anything, he's sort of the, at least in my view, he's sort of a spokesman for the established wisdom among the chattering classes in foreign affairs and defense communities throughout the Western Europe, the United States, Washington, New York, California, and London. So here he is, sort of the voice of the establishment, saying Israel has fundamentally changed the way that we are supposed to look at the possibilities in the Middle East. That until Israel struck Hezbollah's leadership in such a stunning and astounding way, basically we just went from, one war to another war. Nobody ever really won. We would reach some sort of a deal for a ceasefire, and then Hezbollah or Hamas or Iran would just go back and rebuild and then strike again, and we'd have another war. So that's basically the way that things have been going for the past several decades in the Middle East. And what he's saying is that Israel realized that actually Iran is not as powerful as it was perceived. Hezbollah is not as powerful as everybody perceived it to be. Obviously, Hamas was more powerful than we perceived it to be. Otherwise, it wouldn't have gotten away with October 7th. But that, Israel's operations in Gaza have really destroyed very much a very large proportion, a very large majority of their war fighting capabilities, their terrorist capabilities, their force structure, et cetera. And so they're in a different position strategically by far than they were on October 7th, Hezbollah as well, Iran as well. And so what he's saying is that, we were thinking that this war was going to end in the same kind of stalemate that was just going to lead to another war, much like the ones that we've already seen. But of course, it's always bigger. And now we're thinking, no, actually, Israel's called Iran's bluff, and we may be looking towards a completely different strategic game going forward after the war. And he's also, very desirous of this outcome. He's very supportive of this outcome, that Israel wins. And then when Israel wins, Iran is no longer posing that kind of threat to Israel and to the Sunni Arab world. And by the way, here's just one more clip about how the Sunnis are looking at this, because, we see all the time the Egyptians biting at Israel's heels, the Saudis saying, oh, yeah, don't go after Iran's infrastructure and the oil because we're afraid. The UAE is saying the same thing. And Jordan will pile on to any anti-Israel messaging that anybody wants to adopt at any given moment. And so this is what Richard Dearlove says about how the Sunni Arab states actually are viewing what Israel is accomplishing in Lebanon and more generally. In relation to Iran and its octopus-like web of terror proxy forces all through the regions that, together with Iran, are waging a seven-front war against Israel. So let's just watch this last part.
The truth of the matter is that the Egyptians, the Saudis, the Jordanians can't say publicly what they really feel because of the volatility of the Arab street. but they will be cheering Israel on from the sidelines, hoping that at long last, the Arab world, the Sunni Arab world, not the Shia Arab world, is coming to terms with the massive destabilization that has been caused by Iran over the last 15, 20 years.
This is really interesting. Again, I mean, this almost sounds like, I mean, it definitely sounds like something that I say and that, Israeli officials would say, and defenders of Israel say, look, the Saudis may be griping publicly, but privately they're absolutely thrilled with what Israel is accomplishing in Lebanon. And by the way, I don't know who he's speaking to, but I know from basically one degree of separation conversations that Saudi and other Arab leaders are having with common friends, common colleagues, that in fact what he said is true, that the Saudis are overjoyed by what Israel is accomplishing, and they absolutely want us to keep our foot on the gas pedal. Same with the UAE. I don't know about Egypt. I haven't heard from my colleagues about that, but certainly the Saudis and the UAE are thrilled with what's happening, and that's important because, again, you have this whole double talk in the Middle East where people will say one thing to Westerners. And this is one final clip that I want to show of Dear Love. I may want to show another one later, but here, one more clip, because the interviewers say to him, but what about the Palestinians? How is it possible that the Arabs are so happy with Netanyahu and what the Netanyahu government is achieving and what the Israeli military is achieving under Netanyahu, because Netanyahu says absolutely he doesn't want a Palestinian state. And so just a quick taste of what Dear Love says about that.
And for the Sunni Arab world, the first issue is more important, which is the conflict between Sunni and Shia Islam. And they are looking at a resolution to that problem before they look at a resolution to the Palestinian problem. And it's quite clear that there was momentum within that contest through the Abraham Accords to a solution to the Palestinian problem, probably not acceptable to the Palestinians, I agree, and the Palestinians are the victims in this, but an accord which was certainly of strong interest and support to a large chunk of the Sunni world. The fundamentals here are that a lot of the Arab world has, as it were, pushed the Palestinian problem to one side, and they're looking through the optic of a much larger contest between basically an Arab alliance which is led by Saudi Arabia and its supporting countries, and Iran on the other side of this equation.
So you get here what he's saying is that, look, from the Arab perspective, right, they care much more about having Israel settle scores with Iran so that the Sunni Shiite competition that's been going on these well-nigh, 25 years or so with Iran and the ascendances and the Sunnis going down ends. So that's much more important to them than the question of the Palestinians. And by the way, the Palestinians might have gotten a stay with the Abraham Accords if it had been allowed to continue on, not maybe one that they like, but certainly one all the same. So he's saying, the concept of going first with the Arabs and leaving the Palestinians to the end was the right concept. That is Netanyahu's strategic vision, and of course also Trump's strategic vision. This is stunning because Richard Dearlove, again, he's like the most establishment kind of guy you can find, and here he is himself saying these things in his mouth. It's coming out of him, not out of some, I don't know, Boris Johnson or somebody who's considered outside of polite society, such as it is of the British chattering classes. He's the one making these statements. So it's really notable that it's coming from him. And he's saying, look, they don't care that much. He also says here, that this is actually something that the British want, that the Americans want, and that the whole concept of Palestinian statehood as being the be-all and end-all of everything is not really, at this point, a cause that is being heralded or championed in any significant way by the people on the ground in the Middle East, who are much more concerned with Iran's ascendance than with anything else. And here Israel is taking care of this, and they're changing fundamentally the chessboard in the Middle East. They're changing the way that we look at the world of possibilities in the Middle East. Until now, it was always just one stalemate generates another war, generates another stalemate. And he's saying Israel has figured out that it doesn't have to be this way anymore, that they can actually defeat Iran. All right. And then he says, and then the problem is, right, when he talks about the fact that it's the West that's most concerned about Palestinian statehood, what is he really saying? He's saying, look, this is our concept. This is what we want. And that's totally true. And here we have to talk, this brings us to the Biden administration that is like around the clock, just, flooding the zone with chatter about how the United States is going to constrain Israel's operations against Iran, how the United States is going to, and on the other hand, how America is protecting Israel from Iran. They're bringing over THAAD missile interceptors to Israel that are going to be manned by American servicemen here on Israeli soil because they're so dedicated to protecting Israel from Iran. But on the other hand, they're doing absolutely everything in their power to protect Iran from Israel by trying to mitigate, to limit, to undermine, to subvert Israel's efforts to cause actual strategic damage to the Iranian regime and Iranian regime targets, whether it's the oil installations, which, have been funding this entire war against Israel, rather than in any way, shape, or form serving the Iranian people who suffer under the jackboot of the regime, and also protecting, of course, Iran's nuclear installations, which on the one hand, they say Israel mustn't attack, and on the other hand, they say, well, Israel doesn't have the capacity to attack, which they are sure of because the United States has barred Israel from purchasing from the United States the weapons platform, particularly the mid-air refuelers, and I think they're 30,000-pound JDAM bombs that you'd need, the mother of all bombs. If you remember the Moab bombs that were used by the U.S. in Afghanistan, that those are considered to be the ordnance that can destroy Iran's nuclear facilities that they've built into mountains deep underground. And, the 2,000-pound bombs that the Americans are currently placing under an embargo and not sending to Israel because they wouldn't want us to fight effectively against Hezbollah in Lebanon, that those definitely wouldn't be powerful enough to actually go after Iran's nuclear installations. So basically the United States is sending all of these contradictory messages, but the overarching concept that they're putting forward is that the United States will not support and in fact is seeking to undermine any action by Israel that fundamentally changes the strategic reality on the ground in Iran. Same is true in Gaza, same is true in Lebanon. They don't want that chessboard changed. They want to keep it the way it was on October 6th, or they want, at the end of the war, for the strategic chessboard to revert to the way it was on October 7th with, again, what Dearlove referred to as, just a constant stalemate. But the stalemate only serves the side of Iran because Iran, under the stalemate, is able to continue forward on its path to nuclear military capabilities, a nuclear arsenal, and Israel remains constrained and placed in a box, you might say, by the administration who claims to be placing Iran in a box, but isn't. So that the status quo, as it stood on October 6th, was actually working, as we saw on October 7th, to benefit Iran's proxies in Iran and to undermine Israel and the Sunni Arabs and their ability to protect themselves from Iran and from their terror proxies. So that's what he's saying. And now what's happened over the past, couple of weeks, starting on September 30th and then I think on October 8th, Prime Minister Netanyahu put out two video messages, the first one to the Iranian people and the second one to the people of Lebanon, where he set out what a new strategic chessboard would look like. What is Israel's day after plan for the region? How does Israel conceive of its victory? What would it look like for the people in the region, to the people who live in the countries that the Iranian regime is directing the war against Israel from, first and foremost, Iran, and then Lebanon. So Netanyahu, in both video addresses, said, look, what we're doing is we're taking action that is undermining their ability not only to continue to make war against us, but to repress you. So I just want to play you a clip of what he said to the people of Lebanon, because this is, I think, a key to understanding Israel's game here. So here, let's just play this one clip.
Israel has a right to defend itself. Israel also has a right to win, and Israel will win. We've degraded Hezbollah's capabilities. We took out thousands of terrorists, including Nasrallah himself, and Nasrallah's replacement, and the replacement of his replacement. Today, Hezbollah is weaker than it's been for many, many years. Now you, the Lebanese people, you stand at a significant crossroads. It is your choice. You can now take back your country. You can return it to a path of peace and prosperity.
What Netanyahu says is, look, we've enfeebled Hezbollah. No, we haven't wiped them out. But until now, and earlier on in his speech, he said, look, Lebanon isn't a country. It's a forward operating base for Iran. And you have been captive. You have been taken captive by Iran. He said Israel pulled out of Lebanon 25 years ago. And since then, you've been occupied not by Israel, but by Iran, which is true because Hezbollah claimed victory when Ehud Barak pulled Israeli forces out of our security zone in South Lebanon. And Hezbollah obviously declared victory. They said they were the first Islamic force that was able to actually force Israel by force of arms out of territory. And that actually inspired Yasser Arafat to launch his massive jihad against Israel just a few months later, beginning in October of 2000. And so Hassan Nasrallah he was perceived as a victor in the pan-Islamic jihad against the Jews because of the way that his terrorism against Israel and his guerrilla war against IDF forces in the security zone during the 1990s had led to the demoralization of the left in Israel in particular, and they were able to compel Prime Minister Barak at the time to agree to their harebrained concept that if Israel withdrew from Lebanon, then Hezbollah would be happy and they would transform themselves into just a normal political party and integrate into the Lebanese state, and everything would be fine because they're a minority in the Lebanese state, and we would win. When in fact we left, Hezbollah was perceived by everybody as the reason for the crushing of the occupation of the Zionists of the Jews, and they were empowered and over a period of I would say 5 years, and 5 years after that, they murdered Rafik al-Hariri, the prime minister of Lebanon, who was trying to force them to dismantle their militia and failed. And so they murdered him. And then they launched the war against Israel in 2006. And by that point, the Lebanese armed forces were already acting as auxiliaries for Hezbollah. Then in 2007, they won the parliamentary elections. And in 2008, they took over the Lebanese airport against the Lebanese military. It was sort of a mini coup. Hezbollah won. And since then, they have been the effective rulers of Lebanon, where all organs of the state, including the armed forces, the security forces, the parliament, the government, everything is beholden, and the financial system, all of it is beholden to Hezbollah. And so Hezbollah has been ruling Lebanon basically unassailably since 2008. And here comes Prime Minister Netanyahu, and he says to them, look, Hezbollah hasn't been this feeble in years, and it is now weaker than the other components of the Lebanese state, and you can challenge them. And this is true for the first time. The balance of power has completely shifted in Lebanon, and Hezbollah it's enfeebled because of what Israel already accomplished. And he's telling the Lebanese people, look, you can take back your country. And if you don't, we're going to turn Lebanon into another Gaza, because we have to. We have the right to win. We've had when he gave this, he said 8,000 rockets shot at Israel. Now it's over 11,000, just over Yom Kippur. The poor people in the north, they had to run to their bomb shelters every 20 minutes. The entire Chag. The Hezbollah shot over 200 missiles at Israel during the holiday. They did the same thing. They wrecked everybody's Rosh Hashanah the same way, every 20 minutes, every hour. Another missile alert, another missile assault or drone assault on northern Israel. They also attacked in the Herzliya region and Ramat HaSharon region over Yom Kippur. So this is what Hezbollah is doing, and Israel has to defeat it. We just added, I think, another division. I think it's 5 or 6 already. I don't know. In Lebanon now, in the ground maneuver. So, Israel is moving. And if the Lebanese don't want to see their country completely devastated, then they're going to have, then Israel is giving them the opportunity, oust Hezbollah from power, dismantle the Hezbollah militias. And we're starting to hear voices inside of Lebanon that are agreeing with Israel. So, for instance, Samir Jaja, who's all of these people have been around like since the 80s or whatever. So Samir Jaja was the head of one of the Christian militias in Lebanon in the 80s and the 90s, and he sort of went into politics. And so he's the head of this Christian party, this Maronite Christian party in the parliament. And the Maronites were some of the first people after 2000 who kind of subordinated themselves to Hezbollah because they saw that Hezbollah was the most powerful force in the country. And so they've had a lot of open cooperation between the Christians and Hezbollah in the decades that have passed. And here's Samir Jaja saying, look, we need to get a new president, which is sort of along the lines that the Americans are saying, and we don't have to be beholden to Hezbollah anymore in terms of determining the identity of the next head of state of Lebanon, because for more than the past year, Lebanon has not had a president because Hezbollah is demanding that their puppet be put in to replace the puppet that whose term of office ended. And for various reasons, they've been deadlocked on this. And Jaja is saying, now we can just ignore Hezbollah. And then more interestingly, even Jaja's spokesman, this guy named Charles Jabot. Anyway, he's the head. He's like Jaja's spokesman, and he gave this interview on MTV, the Lebanese broadcaster, yesterday, where he said that the non-enforcement of UN Security Council Resolution 1559, which was passed in 2004, was sort of the mother of all of Lebanon's problems. And just for background, so 2004, the UN passes this 1559 resolution, which says that all of the militia operating in Lebanon have to be dismantled, and just because the UN is cowardly and just sort of anti-Israel, so they didn't mention Hezbollah by name, but everybody understood that the resolution itself was directed against Hezbollah, and it was directing Hezbollah to be dismantled. Like, who's going to do it? Was supposed to be, the Hariri government, the Lebanese armed forces that were supposed to be undertaking the dismantlement of Hezbollah, and it was not enforced. And so what he says here is that the non-enforcement of 1559 and the 1559 called for respect for Lebanon's sovereignty and independence and the dismantling of militia, first and foremost Hezbollah. Its non-enforcement, he said, led to the death of more than 100,000 Lebanese over the past 20 years. So he's saying that by not dismantling Hezbollah, 100,000 Lebanese have died. So this is a big deal. And then he said, and it's led not only to the death of 100,000 Lebanese, but also to the destruction of the country. And he says, he added in this interview, the narrative of the resistance has been crushed. Who crushed it? Israel. He didn't say, but he's saying the narrative of the resistance has been crushed. And so the time has come for the idea of the sovereign country of Lebanon to return. Now, are we supposed to take him seriously? We're supposed to take him seriously in the sense that the Lebanese are listening to Netanyahu. They're seeing the enfeeblement of Hezbollah, right? That they are in distress, that they are in spiritual distress, that they have been humiliated, both from a spiritual level. They're no longer seen as the inevitable and invincible soldiers of Allah, but rather they're being They're being brought low and humiliated by Israel. And here I just want to show you a short clip of these Hezbollah commanders who were wounded in the beeper and the walkie-talkie intelligence operations, going and visiting the tomb of a Shiite saint in Iran. Just watch this for 1 second. Here, what we see in this stunning clip, I think it's stunning, is the spiritual distress that has now gripped Hezbollah's men, that they feel like, everything has come apart, that this wasn't supposed to happen. And what do believers do in time of distress? They go and they pray at the tombs of their religious prophets, their leaders, and that's what they're doing. By the way, this is true in Judaism as well. When you're in distress, when a member of your family is in distress, when something is happening and you need a blessing, then you will often go and pray at the grave of Shimon Bar Yochai in Meron, or the Baba Sali in Netivot, or many other religious leaders who are considered to have spiritual closeness, proximity to God, who can be interlocutors for your prayers, etc. So this isn't unfamiliar to Jews, but it is a clear admission that Hezbollah is in distress. They've been humiliated. The Lebanese are starting to see this. They're starting to respond to this distress by saying, maybe Netanyahu is right. We haven't seen anything of this nature, at least since Hariri's assassination in 2005. And since then, Lebanon has essentially been subjugated to Iran completely. And so these are sounds that indicate that Netanyahu knows exactly what he's doing, right? And that Dearlove is right, that the fundamentals of the strategic calculus in the Middle East have changed and shifted. And this brings us back to whom? To President Biden, to Vice President Kamala Harris. So Kamala Harris, speaking as a presumptive next president, whatever, she spoke to a press gaggle on, I think it was on October 10th, and here's what she said about where the administration wants to go with Gaza, with Lebanon, with Iran. Just watch, just like 2 seconds, I promise. It's like, you don't have to watch it for too long. Anyway, here, look.
I'll say that what I've been saying about this, we have got to reach a ceasefire, both as it relates to what's happening in Lebanon and, of course, Gaza. We are working around the clock in that regard. But we need these wars to end, and we've got to definitely de-escalate what is happening in the region, and we're working on that.
So what she's saying here, right, is that the administration wants de-escalation. That's her new buzzword, de-escalation, immediate ceasefire, de-escalation. What she's saying is that the administration wants to put Israel back in a box. They don't want Israel to win. If Israel win, everything, all their plans for empowering Iran with nuclear appeasement and, and enabling its equities to run rampant, or, to maintain their positions in all of the states that they swallowed up, like Hezbollah swallowed Lebanon or what have you, they want that to continue. And of course, for Hamas to survive the war with Israel intact, or more or less intact, and capable of rebuilding its forces as quickly as possible. So she's saying that's what the Americans want. And here I just want to take one step back, because I don't know if I actually put this forward. But, I was talking about it with my friend Dave Wormser, who, as frequent watchers of this show know, is a frequent guest on my show, and he's just a strategic genius. And so we were talking about what the American game plan is. We talk about it constantly. And so, he said in the conversation we had last week, look, you have to go back to Obama. And he reminded me that the first thing that Obama did effectively from a strategic perspective after coming into office is that he organized this nuclear disarmament conference in Washington, which stunned Israel. It's like, what are you doing, right? And so he was saying that, he thinks that the problem in the world is that only the West has nuclear weapons, which is a lie, of course, because Pakistan has them, India has them, though I would argue that Pakistan is the problem here. Iran seeks them. North Korea, of course, has them thanks to the idiotic diplomacy of Wendy Sherman when she was working for the Clinton administration. And thanks to Wendy Sherman under the Obama administration, Iran is stone's throw away from a nuclear arsenal. So Iran is on the threshold. Pakistan has nukes. North Korea has nukes. And obviously China, Russia, they have nukes. And so Obama's concept was stupid at the time, but his idea was what we need is nuclear disarmament, like we're in the 1970s or something like that. And he had this conference that Israel boycotted, and because it was supposed to put Israel under the microscope. And then when Robert Gates, who was a holdover from the Bush administration, he was brought in to be Obama's first Secretary of Defense. So I remembered that when Gates had his confirmation hearings, again, he stunned Israelis because what he said was, well, Iran, it's not that they're seeking nuclear weapons. It's just that, since Israel has nuclear weapons, Iran needs them to balance Israeli power, which shocked Israelis twice. Once because, Israel has never acknowledged that it has a nuclear arsenal, and America has never acknowledged that Israel has a nuclear arsenal. And so it's always considered to be a presumptive nuclear arsenal because nobody's ever said that it exists. Okay. And here's Robert Gates, he was the George W. Bush's defense secretary, and now he's coming in to be Obama's defense secretary. So he's in a position to know, and he says this in open hearings before the Senate. Right. So that was the first shock. The second shock was that here is the Secretary of Defense of the United States, or the nominee, and of course he was confirmed, so he became, again, the Secretary of Defense under Obama. And here he is saying that, Israel is a problematic actor, and that Iran is definitely, reasonable to think that it needs nuclear weapons in order to countermand the threat that Israel poses to Iran. Like, there's nothing wrong inherently with this Iranian regime that's jihadist, that's imperialist, that seeks the annihilation of Israel, that seeks the annihilation of America. No. They're a normal actor, and they're behaving rationally by wanting nuclear weapons because Israel has nuclear weapons. So this was, shocking. But the basic concept that the Obama administration came into office with, and then it only expanded over the 8 years that Obama was in power, was that Israel is the problem in the Middle East, not Iran, and that by giving Iran an open path to a nuclear arsenal through the nuclear deal that America concluded with Iran in 2015, that Iran was going to become a strategic counterbalance to Israel, and that was a good thing. Okay, so that was the Obama administration's strategic concept regarding Iran, and to this end, they also not only did they abrogate UN Security Council sanctions against Iran by signing the nuclear deal, which ended or suspended UN sanctions against Iran, and they were supposed to be snapped back, but the administration always opposed that because it was all a lie, and it was just to make Republicans feel comfortable voting for it, or Democrats feel comfortable voting for the deal. The administration's concept itself was totally demented. I mean, it made absolutely no sense, and it didn't take into account anything about the nature of the Iranian regime or anything about the nature of Israel, which is a stabilizing force in the Middle East. And the second strategic concept that the administration had was that it's because Israel has no strategic counterbalance in a nuclear-armed Iran that Israel feels too powerful. And if it's too powerful, it won't make peace with the Palestinians, because the only way that Israel will agree to a deal with the Palestinians is if it's so enfeebled that it can't say no to American pressure. And this is precisely what then Secretary of State John Kerry said in 2014 when his mediated talks between Israel and the Palestinian Authority failed because Israel refused to, scupper its control over the Jordan Valley, in exchange for American promises of really super duper, super scientific, sensors that were going to protect us from an Eastern invasion because he said so. So, that fell through, and he, along with Martin Indig, blamed the whole failure on Israel. Israel was at fault. It was all Israel's fault. And the reason why Israel didn't agree to this deal that would have made it indefensible is because Israel is too powerful. And so and then Kerry was the lead negotiator of the nuclear deal with Iran, which was supposed to enfeeble Israel strategically, so that everything was linked, right? Because Israel was supposed to be balanced by Iran, and Israel, by being balanced by Iran, would become completely dependent on the United States for protection, like, again, the THAAD missiles that they're supposed to be putting here to protect us from Iran. And in order to secure American strategic protection from an Iran that is nuclear because of American foreign policy, Israel was going to be compelled to make concessions to the Palestinians that endangered it from a conventional perspective by establishing a Palestinian terror state in its heartland, including in its capital city, Jerusalem, and in Judea and Samaria. So that was the Obama concept. Trump totally abandoned it and decided to rebuild America's alliance structure by first and foremost recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital and moving the embassy to Jerusalem. And that standing with Israel and realigning the United States back with Israel and the Sunni Arabs was what engendered the strategic environment that allowed the Abraham Accords to be carried out, and the sublimation, the subordination of the Palestinian conflict with Israel to the Arab-Israeli conflict. So end the Arab-Israeli conflict, and then the Palestinians will either agree to a deal or they won't, but nobody will care really. And so that was the Trump doctrine: stand with your allies against your enemies. The Obama doctrine was stand with your enemies in order to screw your allies. And as soon as Joe Biden came into office, he reverted to the Obama strategy. And that's a strategy that we see playing out in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Iran, which is that we want to maintain the strategic concept of Obama, that Iran retains its economic, its financial capacity by non-enforcement of U.S. economic sanctions against Iran. They've made $144 billion in oil profits since 2021 due to U.S. non-enforcement of its oil sanctions against Iran. For instance, that was the financial basis of the war that Iran has been waging through its proxies and directly against Israel for the past year. So that was one aspect. Continued nuclear diplomacy with Iran, which has led, according to Tony Blinken, to Iran being a week or two away from achieving independent nuclear capability. Okay, so that's where they are. And in Lebanon, Hezbollah is in charge. In Gaza, Hamas is in charge. The United States wants to put a fig leaf of the Palestinian Authority over Hamas and then use that end state of the war as a means to coerce Israel into agreeing to a Palestinian state, not only in Gaza, but in Judea and Samaria and Jerusalem. So that remains the strategic concept the United States embraces under Biden and under Kamala Harris. This is where they want to go. And as a result, they've been pushing for an immediate ceasefire since October 7th, really, with Hamas and with Lebanon and with Iran vis-a-vis the much delayed Israeli strike against Iran. What you keep seeing is American messaging that says Israel, A, doesn't have the capacity to do anything serious against Iran, and B, the United States totally opposes anything that Israel would do against Iran, and C, the United States is not going to be dragged into a regional war because of Israeli adventurism that it can't actually cover, right? A bounced check by Israel against Iran that's going to lead to a regional war. Of course, we're in a regional war and have been in a regional war since October 7th, but that's the American messaging. And so out comes Ms. Kamala and says that she wants de-escalation and an immediate ceasefire. And by the way, you had the CIA director completely apropos of nothing saying that, Iran doesn't even want a nuclear weapon. That was what he said last week because whatever. Anyway, so that's what they're doing. And that leads us back to Israel. So you see Jaja and his people. You have similar voices in Gaza that are coming out. They're not that strong, but calling for an unconditional release of all of the hostages so that Israel will stop its bombing of Gaza. You're seeing, heartbreaking videos. I saw a video of a little toddler boy digging a hole in Gaza, trying to look for Sinwar, saying Sinwar, Sinwar. Everybody's dead. When are you going to get back the hostages? Sort of interesting. I hope that little boy's okay. But there's a sense of brokenness among the people of Gaza, of the Palestinians. Gee, this didn't really work out that well. We still think October 7th was great. We're still proud of ourselves as Palestinians. We still hate the Jews, but look, this didn't work out really well. We really have to make some sort of a deal. Let's get rid of the hostages, etc. So you're seeing that. You're seeing the Lebanese start to make the noises. And of course, in Iran, you have a regime that's rejected by 80-90% of Iranians who are just dying to take over. So they're waiting for a strategic strike against the regime that's going to enable them to then oust it from power. And the Americans are like Hans Brinker, putting their finger into the dike, saying, no, stop. We don't want anything to happen. But things have already happened, and things have already changed. And that brings us back to the countdown to November 5th. Israel has this time. We have like 23 days now. It's Sunday, October 13th, 23 days until Tuesday, November 5th. And Israel has this time. I'd say we squandered, I don't want to say squandered, but, it's been 13 days since we were attacked by Iran. And, time is of the essence. The further along we get in the strategic inevitability, the perception of strategic inevitability of Israeli victory, the kind of thing that Richard Dearlove was talking about in his interview with the Times radio or whatever their podcast, the more inevitable it will be, so that nothing engenders success better than success. If Israel is able to take out strategic targets, and I don't know what they have to be. I don't even want to talk about oil or bases I don't know. But I mean, they're just as our beepers against Hezbollah's mid and senior leadership took out, that was a strategic strike against Hezbollah with extraordinary implications for the future. So that's the sort of thing that we have to start looking for, expecting in Iran. And I don't know what form it will take, or even, if it'll be an airstrike, who knows. But the point is that we have to maintain this forward momentum or we're going to lose it. And then we'll lose people like Dearlove. And I saw that David Petraeus also, gave an interview to the same effect last week. We're going to lose that momentum. We're going to lose that sense of inevitability of Israeli victory. And then all of the people who are starting to get really excited in Saudi and UAE and London and Washington are going to, curl back into their fetal position. And the Obama wing of the Democratic Party, which controls the Democratic Party, is going to spring into action. And they have nearly 3 months to do that between November 6th and January 20th, regardless of who wins. So I think, time is really of the essence, is what I'm saying. I believe that Israel turned a corner when you look at Prime Minister Netanyahu's statements, and he's been very careful not to say too much recently, unlike his motor-mouth Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. But all the same, the strategic messaging has been good. It's been clear. It's been saying the day after is a day after dominated by regional peace under an Israeli security umbrella, as opposed to an Iranian nuclear and terrorist system that goes out throughout the region and threatens everybody. So I think, we are there. We're on our way to victory. And really what stands between, as Richard Dearlove said, what stands between Israel and victory is the United States. And the question is Israel going to be able to, bridge this obstacle? Are we going to be able to get past it or not? I think that the smart money is on, yes, we didn't get this far in order to shrink away at the moment of decision. So those are my thoughts for today. And I don't know if we're going to have time for another In Focus before our next holiday, Sukkot. So I'll try. And if not, then I'll see you next week. Take care.